Did you know that the address in Finding Nemo, P. Sherman, was an allusion to the Filipino pronunciation of P. Sherman? And that the expressions of and moments of sadness and sorrow of Carl from the movie Up were created by a Filipino who inspired those scenes from his experiences with his father? That's right. Filipinos are represented in foreign films in subtle ways. Some of the Filipinos behind this include Nelson Bohol, Armand Serrano, Jose Trinidad, and Virginia Cruz Santos. Having a foothold in representation, these Filipinos then work their way to the extent of not just illusions, but the creation of explicit Filipino characters. Raya, Milan, and Floats are examples. Filipinos are one of the main outsourcing partners of foreign animation studios in Asia. They have done quite well to secure their representation in the foreign spotlight. But this doesn't necessarily mean that all of the Filipinos are being taken by foreign studios and that the Philippines is being drained of all the skilled Filipino animators. The Philippine animation industry began in the 1980s, behind other nations in development. However, it has managed to make massive progress since then. Now there are 4,609 film and animation establishments in the country, with a combined gross revenue of 1.796 billion pesos, some of which participated in the French trade show, such as ASI Animation Studios, Toon City, and Synergy 88. It is reported that it generates 6.4 billion pesos every year in revenue, employs 11,000 full-time employees, and grows by 10 to 12% annually, and is expected to keep growing. For me personally, the apogee of which is the Netflix film Trese, a thriller featuring the city of Manila being ravaged by urban monsters. Just 3 days upon its release, it became one of the top 10 TV shows in 19 countries. The representation of Filipino animators in foreign industries have shown the talents and capabilities of Filipinos. It has given them rationale and incentive to invest in the Philippines, further amplifying the whole realm of the Philippine animation industry. But underneath these successes lie elements that underlie them. Is it something about Filipino culture, Filipino traditions, Filipino work ethic, Filipino whatever? In this video, we shall be examining those, the facets of the realm of Filipino animation. Upon the understanding of so, we shall then give solutions and proposals as to how the Philippine animation industry can conceivably be extended or improved upon. At the same time, we shall also be tackling the flaws, impediments, and drawbacks that lie ahead of it, and propose solutions regarding it. Let's begin with some historical context, shall we? The animation industry in the Philippines formally began in the 1980s, initiated by Jerry Garcia's Panday, inspired by the comic book of the same name. It featured the common plot among Western tales of a chosen hero bestowed upon with an extraordinary ability and a strong will fighting evil. It was a success. It was followed by Captain Barbel and Darna. By the time these were released, there were little to no animation studios up and running in the Philippines. Instead, foreign studios such as Burbank Studios came to the Philippines and hired Filipinos to work for them. The Filipinos went on to hone their crafts through practice and joined together to form their very own animation studios. The style of animation was pretty traditional at that time. They drew with pencils and used cell animation, like in Tom and Jerry. Taught by and inspired by Western animations, they imitated the Western style. However, in doing so, they always made sure to add an explicit Filipino feel to their works. This tinge of Filipino-ness is what we have to know in order to get the bigger picture. The Filipino-ness is rooted in Filipino culture. We shall examine what those are which are utilized. Ironically, the foremost fact would be that Filipinos admire foreign influences, especially Western ones. Now, this shouldn't be frowned upon. It should instead be cherished, as this gives Filipinos the flexibility and capacity to incorporate those useful elements into their works. Besides, let's face it, Filipinos have a sort of inferiority complex towards, Westerners especially. Plus, the mainstream is what attracts general audiences. So going about a diversion just isn't worth it. It's more sensible to just bite the bullet, Fortunately, this spurned good results. Trese, the first Filipino comic book adaptation in Netflix, just 3 days after its release, became among the top 10 TV shows to watch in 19 countries. The film series sports features and visual effects redolent of anime, as shown here. Another key aspect of Filipino culture, reflected in Filipino animation, is the importance of family ties. This was reflected in the movie Finding Nemo, one of whose co-producers is Nelson Bohol, a Filipino, in which the father of Nemo, Marlin, searched for his son after he was captured by a human scuba diver. The Disney 2020 Christmas advert featured an elderly grandma bonding with her granddaughter. As a sideline to Filipino culture, there's also Filipino misconduct. The movie RPG Metsanwa features a reclusive video game addict who neglects his social life and disobeys his mother just to play his video game. But he became good at his obsession, going so far as to get sucked into the world of the video game that he's playing, in which he was chosen to be the savior of the world of that online game. Apart from all this Filipino behavior, Filipinos also have abilities and capacities that enable or assist them in unleashing these elements. The first of which is connected to the first mention in the citation of Filipino elements in movies and films, is the Filipinos' ability to speak in English. This enables Filipino animators to intercept foreign ideas that are expressed in the lingua franca. Filipinos are also industrious. They make sure to never omit their duties. Lastly, they're nice people. Now, these are all great, of course, but the bigger question is, how do we optimize? To do so, we must know and understand the setbacks that, unfortunately, the Philippine animation industry faces. The most crucial factor is lack of funding. Filipinos, through exposure to Western films such as Game of Thrones, Vikings, Avengers, have used them as a benchmark in judging the quality of films. But the thing is, these films have infinitely higher budgets than Filipino films do. Bagani, the highest budget Filipino film of 2018, has a budget of 300 million pesos, whereas Game of Thrones, on the other hand, has a budget of 3 billion pesos! Tenfold! Because of the greater quality of the latter type movies, potential Filipino audiences are taken away from the local market. Add to this the fact that many of the budgets of the high-quality films, animated films included, such as Ibong Adarna, Daya, Ordaha, or RPG Metsanwa, the one I mentioned earlier, their budgets don't equalize or exceed their box offices, which is what's required for a film to be financially successful. I suppose this is the result of the combined issues of Filipino predilection for Western films, as mentioned earlier, and, honestly, relative lack of creative skill. This, unfortunately, catalyzes upon itself in a vicious circle, causing Filipino animators to have less of a morale to even invest, produce, or make animated films. They resort to the same old hackney formulaic plots. But not all hope is lost. This can be fixed. The first Filipino original series on HBO, On the Job, The Missing Eight, was recognized in the 2022 Venus Film Festival. A success. Trese, the one I mentioned earlier, is another example. The difference between the successful films and unsuccessful ones is that The former was made for a global audience and received foreign support. The big mistake of the creators of the unsuccessful films was attempting to do an autarkic methodology. No, the world is globalized, especially the film industry, through networking. The only way to keep the Philippine animation industry in the Philippines up and running is by joining this international global trend. The second issue is the decentralized diversity of film and animation establishments in the Philippines. There are a total of 4,609 of such in the Philippines, 99.9% literally of which you do not even know. The entertainment industry in the Philippines is already monopolized, and the labor force of these various entities would be put into much more efficient use if they all fused into one singular company or a few competing ones. These are only a few of the possible solutions that can be implemented to solve this plight. But always remember, the key factor, the crucial factor in implementing these so that success can be attained is whether the Filipinos are willing or not. If this prerequisite is present, then the Filipino people shall rise up to the world from the shadows of other foreign nations, and their worth, their capabilities, their potential will finally be realized. And thus, we can have another reason to be proud of being a Filipino. Thank you for listening, Sir Benjamin. And I hope dearly that in my video presentation, in my attempt to promote the animation industry in the Philippines wholeheartedly and with maximum effort, you have learned a lot. Adieu.